I could not ask for a better setup in this because this is brought to you by the CashDrop office. Shout out, big shout out to the CashDrop office / the CashDrop media team / Ruben Flores himself. I swear to God, big shout out because this is an amazing setup we have today. We're going to have an awesome conversation. Ruben Flores is a serial entrepreneur. He's a proud immigrant. He's a versatile creator of things. He's on a mission to build as much generational wealth for Latinos as possible while he's alive around the world. He's the CEO and founder of CashDrop, a startup that lets anyone turn their side hustle into a business by instantly creating an online store with payment processing. Boom. I know a lot of people who need that. In our first interview that I ever did with him, he said, quote, he's just a very obsessive guy with a lot of hobbies. Welcome, Ruben.
Thank you for having me.
Intersection Podcast. Yeah.
I'm excited.
You've said, one of my favorite quotes you've ever told me is, the system isn't broken. It's just designed really well for a certain type of person. And when Prince gave his commencement speech in the 90s when he won Artist of the Decade, and I'll paraphrase this to make it short, when it's your game, you make the rules, everything comes easy. When it's not your game and you didn't make the rules, everything is very hard. So imagine what it will all be like if we all ran our own game.
Yes, that's a great quote, actually. I mean, this is something that I talk about all the time. At first, I thought it was going to be kind of, a lot of people would look at me weird when I said it. But yeah, I just realized one day that the system isn't broken. It works extremely well, right? It was just not designed for somebody that looks like me. And when I came to that realization, both it made me angry, but also it made me excited because it just meant that I was born in this time and a place where somebody that looked like me could actually build something that could affect future generations. And that just was amazing, right? Like, as a Latino man, I've always felt that I have to work twice as hard to get half as far as people. And this is something that, my father instilled with me when we first moved to America. And it's something that I, realized early on that, yes, I didn't start from zero. I started from negative, right? And, you could either just sit down and cry about it, or you can actually use it as an opportunity because of your work ethic really just is that much more than the average person because you have to. You're just going to get so much further. And I think that, that was the big realization for me to take this as my personal responsibility to say, look, my story is not that special. I represent like a tiny drop in the gigantic bucket of millions of people that have my upbringing, right? We never been given these opportunities, but I think it's our responsibility to give those opportunities for ourselves and create a system that gives opportunities like to those people that share our stories, like the ones we never had, and that is where the anger kind of goes away, and then just kind of turns into a little bit of respect, right? Like I respect the power structure of like what the white males have created. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people, again, it could be polarizing to say it, but it's respect. Like they're really looking after the best interest. I feel like humans do. It's our responsibility to do so, right? It does create biases that could, affect others, but I think it becomes an opportunity for us, the disenfranchised, the unempowered, to rise up, build our own table, right? Like we don't need to beg for a seat at their table. We're perfectly capable of building our own. And when you do that, then you really understand what it takes to build something from zero. You value it more. The work ethic that was required out of you to get to this stage just becomes this incredible unfair advantage that I think today and age could really help you just take it to the next fucking level unlike anything people have seen before. So I think Latinos represent this gigantic opportunity for the future of humanity that I want to really bring out of them. And I really speak to that young version of me to say, look, si se puede, keep going. It may not be fair, but like your job is to make it fair for you and for the people that share your values.
That goes on to my next question. So you've said as a minority, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. But the fact that you work twice as hard at some point creates this compounding effect that no matter what situation you face in life, being able to work that hard is always beneficial to your situation. AKA, these colonial hangovers have developed a secret superpower, which when the odds have worked against you, you just and you develop the superpower to work really hard. So tell me what.
I mean, we've all heard that saying that necessity is the mother of invention and ingenuity, right? Like, where I come from, you had to be creative. Where I come from, you just had to make it work, right? There isn't a plan B. You're not going to let your family go to sleep hungry. You're not going to fail because failure means death. It means everything that you're just not going to let it happen. So I feel like that's the ingrained immigrant mentality. There isn't a plan B, right? And this is another thing that I speak very, very, very proudly about. It's like, I always tell people failure doesn't exist. Within the scope of reality, you're either successful or you stopped, right? Failure really isn't an outcome, right? It's just the lack of trying. And I feel like, that is so natural for somebody that shares my background, because we didn't have a choice but to work a lot harder to make up the difference, right, that we didn't have, at birth, right? And I think that really does compound, right? Is it sustainable for the long term? No, but at some point I feel like you're just catching up momentum where then you can really grow structures and, delegate more and more and more. But the mentality, I think, is really something that I think the more people that adopt it can really take you very far in life. And again, it's really not that radical. It's just something that's already ingrained within the culture that, and I speak for like Latinos, but I'm sure this is, and I have a lot of friends from other ethnic groups. I think this is just ingrained in the immigrant mentality, right? Like I do feel that the immigrant mentality is really the essence of being human, right? To me, being an immigrant represents the most human of values, which means sacrifice. It means there is no plan B. Therefore, I must sacrifice for those I love to provide them the life that they deserve. There is no other outcome. And that is what being an immigrant really means. That you leave everything behind, you do what has to be done, you provide for those who you need to protect, right? And you do it without complaining. And when you really measure that up to the standard, you are really working twice as hard. But when you realize where you were 5 years ago versus where you are today, like, it's actually quite incredible what somebody in that situation is able to accomplish. Furthermore, they were able to have access to opportunities, from there. So I feel like that's where the responsibility of building that system that works for people that share those values is super important. Because if I would have been able to have opportunities that I have now when I was getting started, like, I can't even fathom where I would be right now. And it's okay. It's part of the journey. We're here. It is what it is. But now I shift my responsibility for the next generation to say, hey, somebody that I know that's 20 years old, 21 years old, like, I see myself in them. I didn't even get started till I was 25. What impact in their life can I do? Number one, instilling this mentality in them to work twice as hard, to know where they need to go. But then if I can add a little bit of fertilizer on top of them, like, where are they going to be when they're my age? I mean, this is the fucking power structure just materializing in my mind. That's the legacy I want to leave behind.
So a lot of people have talked about this immigrant mentality in a lot of different ways, shapes, and forms. But one way that you have spoke about it that's extremely unique to me, that I want to dig into a little deeper because I've never heard anybody talk about it this way, is that years ago you printed a lot of T-shirts that said, quote, immigrant on them with a barcode. And I remember this white guy that you were a roommate with, I could name or not, you convinced him in a beautiful way that technically he's an immigrant because at one point his ancestors immigrated somewhere, that every human on the planet is an immigrant. So being an immigrant actually unites people as long as they're comfortable identifying that way. So I want to dig into that a little bit more. Why do you choose to perpetuate that kind of message?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do have this innate kind of need of create these larger associations with others because I grew up a minority, right? Like, and one of the most, call it toxic, of unfortunate byproducts of growing up as a disenfranchised minority is that there is so many subsegmentations from there, right? Like when I came to America, I knew nothing but Mexicans. It was like everybody kind of looked like me. I was on the lighter end of the spectrum, but it's like there's only Mexicans in Mexico. There's only Mexicans, right? You come to America, it is that proverbial melting pot of people that you've never met. Like, I never even know what a Hmong person was till I came to America, right? Like, and you see people from all ethnicities and all walks of life, which I think, you know, the diversity is really what makes America very, very strong. You know, it's blessing and it's curse in a lot of ways. So I feel like I've always really been very passionate about associating myself to the larger, you know, demographic, right? And because I grew up in the opposite, you know, like when you're a Latino, you're either Mexican or Guatemalan or Colombian, and you're not the same. You know, like you create more and more divisions because that's how the system really brings you up.
What is that? What do you think that is?
I think it's again, it's a byproduct of it, right? Like, when you're fighting for scraps, right, we fail to realize how much resources this world has. Way more than enough to really keep everybody well fed and beyond. But obviously, we are used to really fighting over the scraps. So you kind of have this very unfortunate survivalist mentality. It cuts both ways, right? The survivalism is what really helps you push through, but it's also what kind of can create a lot of negative side effects where you're kind of pushing yourself down. And you know, the way that I always talk about this is a lot of like people in the Latino communities feel that somebody else's success is at your expense, right? Like that if another Mexican or another Latino is successful, they're taking away from your eventual success, therefore they're competition, therefore you can't work with them. And that's very unfortunate because it's actually quite the other way around, right? But it's very hard to kind of like disassociate yourself and think the larger picture when everything you've ever known is just the scraps that fall through the system, right? So I think to me, I wanted to find that greater association, you know, to be like, what is that common thread? Like, we're all human, we know this, right? But we don't treat each other like they're the same. So, you know, like there has to be a deeper, more emotional connection that we can all agree on, at least in the American way of life. And, you know, again, we're America, you know, there was Native Americans, right? But for the most part, the vast majority of people as it stands today were not here 246 years ago is when America was founded, right? Where these people come from, right? They were not here. So it's like I felt like I was part of that, right? So it's like I wasn't here 5 years ago and here I am, right? New
but
language.
You're still much as part of America as most of the people today here are.
I like to say so, right? Like I still consider myself a Mexican man in America because I immigrated here, right? Like, you know, a lot of what you call first generation, you know, Americans that they were born here, they're American, their parents weren't born here. So that's, I think, where I started toying around with this idea. I said, well, if people can talk about themselves in the first generation, what about second generation? What about third? What about fourth? You know, and I started kind of experimenting with this idea, and I think it really hit this very strong emotional chord. And I said, look, you know, in the friend that you're talking about, Adam, you know, his great grandparents immigrated from Syria and you know, like other parts of Europe. And, you know, he was always very like attached to the message of the immigrant thing. But it's like, obviously he was a white guy with blue eyes, you know. He never really felt like he could wear a shirt that said immigrant on the chest. I could, because I literally immigrated here. But I also had a lot of other Mexicans that wore it, but they were born here, right? So I said, look, wear the shirt. You know, it's like you can be an ally, but I think more than just being an ally, let's kind of create another further layer of inclusion. Like, you are the byproduct of the same struggle that brought me here. Your great-grandfather, your grandfather sacrificed, left everything behind to pave a way for somebody like you to have the opportunities you do today. And that is the essence of what I want for my future descendants. I would want my great-great-grandkid to look back and be proud of the fact that they are an immigrant, that they are part of this beautiful struggle. Again, I refer to immigration as this human value that represents the most fundamental, beautiful thing about what it means to be human, which is it's not about me, it's about the people I love. And when you kind of remove and really approach it from the selflessness of it, you know, you really realize what's important. And every single person that left their homeland, that is here today, right, represents that, and so do their descendants. But at some point, you realize like kind of everybody is an immigrant, and I feel like if you really approach it from that, then you realize, wow. If there was a war in America and the economy went to shit, which, you know, some people might say we're fairly close to that happening right now. Tables turn fucking fast.
Say that,
you know what I'm saying? So it's like if that happened today and you were forced to leave your homeland to go to Europe, to go somewhere else, right? Like, would you do it if you know that that's what you needed to do for your kids to have a better life? Yes, you fucking would.
Absolutely.
You do what you have to do for those you love. That's what immigration means, right? Like we're all byproducts of that human condition. You know, humans originated in Africa. Like nobody is from any one place.
Everybody from Africa.
But again, like the point is not so much about, you know, for me to create political ideologies and things. It's me trying to really connect us on this like single thread to say you would do, like, would you do what it took for those you love? Yes, I would do so too. That's what connects us. That's the people that I would trust with my life. That's the people that I would want to take care of my kids. That's the people I would like to build empires with, right? If you don't have that fundamental value to yourself, I would want absolutely nothing to do with you, because to me that represents the basis of being a human.
No bad.
And that's why I wear the shirt, and I feel like that's what really enabled others to say, wow, I never thought about it that way. And then all of a sudden you had people with beautiful stories say, hey, I'm a 7th generation immigrant. I'm an 8th generation immigrant. And they felt like they weren't allies, because still being an ally doesn't mean you're part of the community. It just means that you're adjacent, right?
Wait, can we dig in that a little bit deeper? Sure. What do you mean by that?
I mean, like, you know, it's like the whole idea of being an ally basically means that, okay, I'm an ally of the feminist movement, but I'm not a female, right? But I believe in, you know, what they're trying to fight for, and I will put myself in the front lines to make sure that I can do my part in helping, you know, to do that. But obviously that one's a little bit more difficult. But like when you kind of created this generalized,
there's a lot of things, a lot of different things you could apply.
So it's like to me, it was very important to say, well, I'm a white guy with blue eyes. I've been here. My parents were born here. My grandparents were born here. But I feel like I want to do my part in making sure that we live in a world where everybody has the same access to opportunity, right? I can be an ally, but I feel like I wanted to even take it further. Be like, well, you can be an ally, but you can also be a part of the community. You are an immigrant, right? And I felt that really changed the perspective of the movement. And I think that's why the shirt really caught on. Sadly, I haven't had much time to do that. I would like to bring it back. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
You were married at 18, which to a lot of people is unusual.
Yes.
But it seemed to me it has worked out beautifully. So what advice do you have to people whose marriage is heavily on their mind, whether they are young or old?
I mean, fuck. This one's a tough one. I don't know if I'm eminently qualified. Yeah, maybe I am. I joke sometimes with friends like I'm a professional husband. I have substantial experience under my belt. And I think at the end of the day, I wouldn't be here without my wife. She's definitely, they're not lying when they say behind every great person, there's a great spouse behind.
Why do you think that's true?
Because like it takes a village, right? But and I'm speaking generally here, like your partner, it makes your life a lot easier, not only physically, like, you know, in sense of like, oh, she can help me with some of the chores, or like, you know, like we can kind of divide and conquer at the house. Although my wife will say I don't do shit at the house, but which is true. I you know, I'm pretty bad at that. No, but I feel like the emotional support that a great partner can provide, honestly, is one of the biggest assets you could have. It really is. So I feel very thankful for my wife. You know, I feel like I've been able to take the risks that I have, right, without fear, because I just knew that she's my ride or die. You know, no matter what happens, we have each other, and that helps a lot. It really does. So shout out to all the wives, husbands out there. You know, they're a big part of the entrepreneurship journey for sure.
This next question is a very general question. You like to talk a lot about what it takes to be successful. And so as an entrepreneur, in this very broad sense, what would Ruben say it takes to achieve success?
I think it takes one thing and one thing only: grit. That's it. It's the only value. It's the only thing. It's the only thing you need to have. Like, grit is it is again going back to that whole like, it takes grit to have the drive to wake up in the day and know that you have to work harder than everybody else to barely make it to where everybody else is at. It takes fucking grit. It's not easy. You have to be able to pull it out of you where even in the shittiest of days to say, I'm waking up at a disadvantage every fucking day of my life, but I am going to fucking power through it without even thinking about it. Like that is the one and only thing I think that breeds the most success. I've been very lucky to be able to actually corroborate that story with some of the great advisors and investors that I've been able to speak about. And it really is just fucking great. I mean, it's entrepreneurship, even life as a whole, is just a brick wall in front of you that you have to keep punching till you break through. That's it. Again, failure just means you stop trying, and it's the ones with ultimate grit that are willing to fucking punch it no matter what until they break through, because not doing so is not an option.
Do you have any moments of grit for yourself in the past where maybe someone can relate to, of where it felt like maybe you couldn't break past your own
Yeah, 100%.
barriers?
I mean, I think this is where having a great support network matters, you know, because, yeah, I mean, like, I still to this point live with some self-doubt. I still to this point suffer from, imposter syndrome every day. And you know,
Listen, guys, listen.
yeah, it's part of the struggle, right? Like it's part of the game. It's a really big part of the game to because you're kind of playing this role of like you're David against Goliath. You are the tiny guy in the eye of adversity, where the odds are stacked against you, where you need to be the statistical and probable exception within the exception within the exception to barely make it through, right? So you need to really fundamentally believe that you're one in a billion. And then the work just began. So like even overcoming the psychological challenge of saying, do I really think I'm one in a billion? And then begin to work on it every day is not easy. You're going to wake up every other fucking day, probably every hour, like questioning yourself. So having people to rely on is very strong. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you need to be able to rely on yourself. And this is something I talk about all the time. I think that, at least for me, what has worked very well in the face of adversity or challenges is I need to frame these things where I am the central problem to the thing.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, let me explain what that means. Like, I'm a control freak, right? And I know if something is within my control, I can overcome it, right? If I'm not the problem, I'm not in control. Right? So everything that I approach, whether it's business or relationships or anything, in the face of adversity, I always try to find a framing where I'm the problem of it, because then I can control it. I can control what anybody else does. I can't control the weather. As much as I want, I can't even control my employees. Right? But if you
that will never happen. Just shout out to any founder of Future.
Shout out to the CashDrop team, right? But I think, it's worked very well for me to be like, if I'm the problem, I can fix it. This is the reason why when you're in an airplane and they talk about the oxygen mask, they said, do not attempt to put it on anybody else until you put it on yourself. If you cannot fix yourself first, you cannot help anybody. You are literally a pile of dead weight. If you don't have your shit figured out, if you can't rely on yourself, if you cannot wake up every fucking day to do the job you need to do, you are absolutely worthless to society and everybody else, as much as good intentions as you might have. So it's like you have to always look inside and have that grit, right? Before you can actually overcome challenges, and then be able to have the support network to help you through those things, so that you always keep balancing yourself to say, I can do it. I have my shit figured out. I have control over everything that I have control. And if I don't, I need to figure out how to achieve that. And you do that by putting yourself right in the center of that fucking problem that you need to solve, and figure out how you're the problem so that you can overcome it. That is a quick and easy recipe for success. And not necessarily, to me, success is not just money in the bank. Success is a mindset. You wake up.
Tell me more about what your definition
success
of
is a fucking mindset. You wake up every fucking day and say, everything I'm about to do, I'm in control of doing it. I'm going to do it the best. Nobody's going to do it better. Nobody's going to do it harder than me, right? And whether that is the reality or not, the mindset that you have, the perception of that you have, is like 99.999% of the outcome, right? The power of the human mind is truly unbounded when you have the grit to achieve the task at hand, and you have that self-reliance to understand that it is within your capabilities, so long as you can frame it in such a way where you are the problem, where you are in control of achieving what needs to be done.
So it's within your capabilities to the extent that anytime you encounter a problem, you can rephrase it as yourself being the source, so that you can solve it within yourself.
Yeah, because I think what breeds the most failure, right? What pushes all the entrepreneurs or dreamers or hustlers that I see to stop is when they feel like, fuck, it's up to the universe.
Something else outside
it's something
of me.
else.
Right,
You're always
right,
pointing the finger. It's my girlfriend, it's my house, it's my mortgage, it's my boss, it's God, is the weather, is the fucking whatever. You project outward, right? You can't do anything about it, so why the fuck even keep trying, because it's out of your control, right? Like, that's the most toxic of mentalities I think in my mind you could ever have, if you really want to, because it's an easy scapegoat for you to just not even keep trying. Mm-hmm. So like, that's where the lack of grit really just shows, right? So again, if you frame yourself as the problem, you can fix it, you can overcome it. And we've put motherfuckers on the moon, we're on the way to Mars. Tell me you can't fucking break through this brick wall that's in front of you. I mean, just where there's a will, there's a way. There's a reason why that saying is a thing. It's very true.
Awesome. Yeah. Super, super awesome. You said that telling stories is the utmost form of culture. I'm really curious what you think, what factors create culture, whether it's, and what the difference is between societal culture and business culture. So what do you think are the factors, whether it's stories or people's behavior and the way that they act and those things that are perpetuated within a business and society that create culture?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, we live in a capitalistic society, so business culture is culture. This is yet another topic that I speak a lot about. Like this, I think that, when it comes to, for example, the CashDrop brand, it's all about money, right? You come to our HQ, there's money in the walls, reference about money, everything we post is about money, right? And the superficial way of looking at it is like, well, all you guys care about is money, like there's no substance to it. But these are things that I ponder, but I've never actually had an encounter where people actually thought that that's what we do. The other side of that coin is something that I fundamentally understand about culture, that at the end of the day, all that people really want is the freedom to spend more time with those they love and to make sure that those they love have the opportunities that they never had, right? That's it. That's where that's the foundational piece of where culture can exist if those boxes are checked. Because if you don't have those boxes checked, there's no ability to make culture because you're just living by the day. You're trying to survive.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, how can you worry about what you leave behind if you're fucking worried about what you're going to eat for dinner, what's going to happen if you're not going to survive? Like that's the difference between being, like caveman in an organized society, right? You come together to build an empire. You understand that you're taken care of, that your children are taken care of, that they can thrive. And then you can think about the secondary, which is how do we collectively leave our imprint in the fabric of the universe for the future generations? That's what culture is, right? The segue for that to really be able to exist is money, right? As much as we fucking hate the idea of money, right? We can say, oh, it's fake, it's based on nothing, and whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's not. Money rules this fucking world, right? Money is a gateway to happiness. It doesn't buy you happiness insofar that, like, you can have all the money in the world and still be, unhappy, but money buys you time. It buys you freedom. It enables you to find what makes you happy. And when you don't have that and you're constantly trying to just barely make ends meet to survive, there's absolutely no way that culture could arise from that. And I think that this is the biggest problem with the immigrant, communities that I came from, right? Like Latinos have very strong heritage, right? But we do kind of live kind of frozen in time of what our cultures back home were before we left, because here we're struggling every day to barely make ends meet, to barely survive, to barely make sure that our kids have basic opportunities. That it's kind of, to me, that's where it becomes self-evident why we suffer from these things where we can't accept other people's success without getting jealous or angry and trying to bring them down. And, another thing I talk about a lot is how, the Latino community particularly suffers from something I called the poppy seed syndrome, right? Like that, every time somebody kind of gets taller or starts showing signs of success, we do everything we can to kind of bring them down. And, I think it's because, to me, I wonder about this a lot. Like, how do you fix that with money? You do. If you inject a fuck ton of money into these communities,
all these communities,
that have never had opportunities.
Right. That's why they talk about reparations.
Yeah, then you'll be able to actually give them the chance to thrive, to show the best expression of what they can provide the world. And like, it just pains me so much to see that so many people that I know and love don't have that ability, or never had that opportunity to really express the best thing that they could become in this world. They've never been able to live to their full potential. And again, that's culture. Culture is the byproduct of the imprint that you're able to achieve and leave for the next generations. We don't have access to that. And that's very fucking unfortunate. And to me, I understand that the only way for me to ever be able to help that is wealth. Money truly runs the world. And I know that Latinos are very money adverse. We don't like to talk about it. It's a very taboo subject, but it's because we've never had a seat at the table. We've never had any type of meaningful generational wealth. So we are speaking truly from ignorance. Because I've seen generational wealth. I don't have generational wealth yet, but I've seen it. I see what it can do. I see what it can provide. I see the chillness it can bring somebody. I see the peace of mind that it can provide. And that's something I'm so fucking jealous for my people to have, that I will wake up every fucking day, outwork anybody in the fucking world to make sure that I can live in a world one day where the vast majority of Latinos that I bump into the fucking street are able to have that quality of life. Because the cultural impact that will have, it can't even be measured, bro. It can't.
That's really profound. That's really, really profound. I'm trying to figure out the best way to segue off of that. I mean, me personally, I want to make it clear that I haven't come from poverty. I haven't come from a lot of violence. But I know a lot of people that it's either you have money, but unless you have money, you have to have come from a lot of pain, or else that money isn't valid, or else you're a sucker, you're weird. And so there's a lot of cultural stigma around money and what that means about the person who has it.
Yeah. I think like very mature wealth can lead to these trust fund kid scenario, that the proverbial trust fund kid that doesn't give a fuck, and they're overloaded and overprivileged. But I think that's a few generations down the line. I feel like the first few generations will really be very valuable, and then you have to hope it's up to them that they can really make sure that they instill their next generations, to be appreciative of that. But that's not even a problem that we have yet. So we don't even know how it would unfold. Maybe our heritage would make sure that we can approach that issue from an interesting way that's never been done before.
So you're saying there's no even reason to anticipate that, because how would you know?
Why are we worrying about problems that may or may not exist when we don't even fucking have, I want us to have that problem. Right? To some degree, I would want it to be so many Latino trust fund babies that are doing absolutely fucking nothing, so that we can then go within our community and be like, what the fuck are you doing? You're just a waste of space. Let's change that. But until we have those problems, we can't say, oh, well, no, if somebody that truly has built-in grit and they've done nothing in their lives but just fucking hard work, which is the vast majority of Latinos I know, you give them a fuck ton of money, they'll buy the Ferrari, they'll buy the yacht, they'll do that, but 2 days later they'll be bored as fuck.
Right.
They're not just gonna fucking, not do anything, like, because they've never known anything else than just hard work. But now they'll do it for pleasure. Now they'll do it because they want to do something. Now they'll help the next guy and invest in 100 trillion businesses because they just want to live. They understand, and they understood what it took to get there. And I want to believe, and it may or may not be right, that if you inject that amount of generational wealth into this community, they'll know the right decision, right? And it may or may not be the case, but I think that my place in this universe is to at least help get my community to that point where we'll know if it was good or bad, right?
Right.
And I think that that's where everything will change. And again, it'll bring us at least to a level of equivalence, in the world where we'll be able to really focus on culture building rather than survival. And I want to see that day before I die.
Segueing off of that, if you look at the majority of your Instagram posts, a lot of it has something to do with you're like, fuck anything else. I'm building as much generational wealth for Latinos in this country as possible. So what does that mission mean to you? Building generational wealth for Latinos in the United States and or the rest of the world, possibly. What does that mean to you? I want to know.
Yeah, I mean, I think you read these stories all the time. I think it was particularly Uber's story that I was very fascinated by, right? Like, we're very lucky that some of our biggest investors were like seed investors in Uber. Shit, one of our investors invested in Uber at a $6 million cap. Insanity, right? He invested $50,000 when Uber was worth like $6 million, and like everybody knows the end. You know what happened?
What happens with
what
that?
happened after that, right? The guy made hundreds of millions.
Got bank.
And also, like, a lot of the employees, the early employees, I think I read something that I feel like it was a few hundred millionaires that got minted when, Uber went public. And I think that happened with like Lyft and DoorDash. And you see these success stories of like these great tech companies where, the founders become billionaires, but also like there's a gigantic amount of wealth that got injected into the people that were there, right? Like, and there's a very famous Jeff Bezos video that I saw one day. He said, look, yes, Amazon's worth $1 trillion and I own 16% of it. But that means that $840 billion of wealth was created for other people. That's how he said it. And we hate the man for being so fucking rich. And I feel like, he becomes the object of our anger when we think like, how can somebody amass so much fucking wealth? It's unfair. But it's like, we don't think it from his perspective when he says, I created $850 billion of wealth for other people.
Most of the wealth isn't his.
Most of the wealth isn't his. So I feel like in that sense, to me, it's like, fuck, like respect, nothing but respect for Jeff fucking Bezos. If he wants to buy a $500 million fucking yacht, do it. He should be allowed to do whatever the fuck he wants because that man changed millions of people's lives. Now, there's other things with like work, workers and things like that. I mean, there's always going to be casualties of war in the capitalist machine. It's not perfect.
Right.
It's a lot of a fucking better than, being communist, and it's another topic for a different day. But I feel like we do live in this world where you can wake up and build something from fucking nothing. And if you have the grit, if you have the dream and you have the drive, you can achieve it. I don't want anybody to cap that. Fuck no. You think I want to wake up one day and be like, no, now I'm capped at this?
Now
Fuck
I have a restriction, right? That would be the worst day. The worst day if I had a restriction tomorrow.
The idea of generational wealth, it's incredible to me that I can live in a country where that could actually happen, not only for myself. I want to be rich as fuck. Not because the money attracts me, but because I know what I'll be able to do with the money. I want to help influence the politics and legislations and power structures and create biases that benefit the people like me. Again, right? Like, don't hate the player, hate the game. And the game really, we hate the game because the game wasn't designed for us. Right. But I think that we can achieve this place
We can play the
where we
game
can
to our own
create
agenda.
our own game, create our own structure, create our own rules. We are actually able to. We just have to work harder, and that's fine. You know, it's not fair, but it is what it is. But the thing is, the fairness comes after those trailblazers work it out and get to this point where, like, now it's fucking fair. Now I want to see my Latinos rise the fuck up, and I will literally shame those who don't take advantage of these opportunities, because now we have them. We don't have those opportunities yet, and that's the only thing that will catalyze that is generational wealth. I want CashDrop to go public, right? And the first 150, 200 employees of mine become millionaires overnight. 10, 15, 20 million dollars of wealth is generational wealth, right? It's a shit ton of money. It's money that nobody of us has ever really seen in our bank accounts, right? And what happens then, right? What happens then? Yeah, some of them go blow it, buy some Coke, buy a Ferrari, go to the strip club. Sure. Go nuts. Do what the fuck you have to do. Get out of your system. But like once the dust settles,
end of the day, when
once the dust settles, bro, you're gonna invest in your tia's business. Right. You're gonna fucking borrow the money for your cousin to launch that restaurant, to launch that venture, and then it just start proliferating into this power structure that will really help other people that look like us. And then we invest in people like us. We give opportunities to those that look like us. We keep them accountable to do right by the opportunities that we didn't have, right? And that's how you compound generational wealth besides the money. The money is that catalyst, right? Like generational wealth begins with money, and the byproduct of is cultural impact, legacy. That's what matters, right? And I said that in my last talk in Chicago Tech Week, and I knew it was going to cost a little bit of a stirrup. And I said, listen,
why would you think it costs a stirrup?
Well, the way I said it, right? Like what I said, look, particularly, and I speak from my experience, like what we're trying to build a CashDrop, right? It's tackling a very large problem of a really large market. You know, digital commerce, payments is the foundation of our society, right? Money. Movement of money, right? We are a very, very advanced merchant society, and we are trying to solve the merchant problem to make it easier for everybody to become one, right? So I said, look, if a white man comes and builds CashDrop and sells it for $10 billion, it means absolutely fucking nothing. Their system enables them to achieve that far faster than it would for somebody that looks like me, right? And that's fine. No hate to them, right? I'm just speaking from a place of jealousy. But again, if another white guy becomes a billionaire, nobody fucking cares. Most of them are, right? But if somebody that looks like me makes it, becomes a billionaire, creates a company that goes public, and 100 employees, 200 employees become uber wealthy overnight, and they all look like that founder, the fabric of space and time is changed forever.
Fantastic.
That is what keeps me up at night. That is the source of my grit. I want to achieve that, right? And I may or may not achieve it, but I know that if I can radicalize as many Mexicans or Latinos that look like me, right, to achieve that, and you throw as many of those motherfuckers at the wall and see one of them is bound to make it, right? It may or may not be me. And I'm okay with that fact. I'm just going to work fucking harder than anybody else to make sure it is me. But at the end of the day, I know that in the greater footprint of what the community that I represent requires, just one of them that makes it, everything changes. Every single kid after that can look up into the stars and be like, wow, I can do it. Somebody looks like me that made it. I can do it better, right? That representation is so fundamentally important in our society that's what I mean when I say that if another Mark Zuckerberg that is white from the suburbs of Silicon Valley makes it doesn't mean anything. There's already 15 of them, 20 of them.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. It's like, sure, you get a nice life and you can change people's lives, but in the greater sense, you know, it's already been done. Can we make sure that we live in a world where there's black billionaires, Latino billionaires, Indian millionaires that are doing it, and they truly have the same access and the same plane to get there just as fast? And maybe we get to a point when in 100 years, there's so many fucking Latino billionaires that it doesn't fucking matter anymore. And you move on to the next one. And it's up until them to to do it for their communities.
Something new.
That's a problem I want to have.
Right.
It's a problem we don't have, and that's the problem. I want my community to have those problems, and that's why I work so hard, right? I want to have the same problems the white people have, right? Because we can't hate them if we are never been there, right? But let's build from scratch. It's our system. We're literally the authors of our own story, right? It's empowering to start from zero.
I don't think white people realize that the novelty they're looking for lies right in front of them, which is empowering other people. But
and again, I can't speak. Sure, I'm a
white people are white people.
It's like I'm a whitewashed Mexican, right? Like I've been called for somebody called me out for my passing white privilege once.
Really?
And I thought it was crazy. And I reflected and I was like, okay, I could see that. Sure, like I don't want to think about it that way. I want to think about the community that I represent, the Mexican American immigrant community as a whole, right? That's the niche that I need to champion. It is my personal duty and responsibility to do my part and be a champion for that. Live and die at the front lines, get rich or die trying for my people, right? That's what I live to do. And again, when you look at the next guy, I can't really speak for the white male experience, right?
I respect individuals.
Yeah. I respect the hustle, right? Like I have my particular preferences. I have my particular beliefs, but they all melt in the face of the hustle. I worship the hustle. And if somebody is there with the hustle to match or outmatch me, I bow down. I'm like, fuck yeah, I can't even hate. I'm just jealous that you maybe had opportunities that I never had, but I'm just going to make sure that the next Ruben has them, right? That's as much as I can do, right? That's legacy to me. That's culture, right? That's the culture I want to live in. That's the culture I think that is what made Silicon Valley great. White people also started, like they had to build and do a lot of things to do. So it's like, it's everybody just building for their own people. It's okay to do so, right? Like we're so proud about like your team in the World Cup, right? Like, we should be proud about this. It's like the World Cup. Yeah, entrepreneurship is like the World Cup. It's like represent your team, be very passionate about that, respect others, and understand that at the end of the day, we're all immigrants. We're all the same. We all came from somewhere.
We all have our own people. It's in some way, shape, or form, whoever we are.
It's like being part of another team is fine, so long as you respect the game. We're all playing the same game. We're all players. We're all part of this grandiose structure that we have built together collectively, whether we like each other or not. I respect you, but I'm going to focus on myself. And this is another thing with entrepreneurship that I was saying, like, stop worrying about what your competitor is doing. Just fucking build your business. If you're constantly looking about what the guy on the left and the right is doing, you're never going to have the foresight to really focus at the problems at hand, because you're so worried about competition. The greats never compete. If you believe you have no competition, doesn't mean you're the best. It just means that you're just focused on your lane. Nothing fucking matters. You're the problem. You're going to fix your problem. Put the blinders on. Fix your shit. Figure out your shit. You will literally get to a point where you are okay with the life that you have built. And nothing will matter. The money won't matter. The success won't matter. The journey will matter. And that's the byproduct of that journey is the cultural trail that will be remembered for generations to come.
I don't think I could end it on a better point. This was an amazing recording. Thank you guys so much for being here. Ruben Flores, the man himself, CEO of CashDrop, a man of many opinions and a man of much passion. And like the people I like to surround myself around. And this is episode 1 of Intersection, the intersection between business and art. Let's go. Woo!
Woo!